Let's get the third day started. And we shift our attention to where I come from, Southeast Asia, to one of the region's powerhouses. Amid a global slowdown, how can Malaysia further diversify its export-oriented economy? Please join me in welcoming to the stage His Excellency Muhammad Rafizi Ramli, Minister of Economy for Malaysia. Now, the world is expecting an economic slowdown, but Malaysia is an outlier. It's looking to exceed expectations, achieve growth of about 4.5%, which, by the way, would make it the fastest growth for the country in about 2 decades. It has been struggling somewhat. So what's driving this optimism? Let's get perspective from the Minister himself. Minister, good to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
What's driving the optimism? I mean, this is a trade-reliant nation. The world is slowing, and Malaysia is expected to achieve better than expected growth. How?
So we've benefited over the years from a very diversified economy. We have the commodities, and we are the second largest palm oil producer in the world. We've built a resilient manufacturing-based economy, which is very export-oriented, especially in chips and semiconductors. And we also benefited from the energy prices, because we have a long-standing relationship with customers in the Far East, but we're also an oil-producing nation. So we are cautiously optimistic.
But fundamentals have not changed. In fact, there are more headwinds now.
Yeah.
What's different?
It's, I think it's given, of course, the post-pandemic recovery is one thing, but I think there's also optimism because for the first time in a generation, we have a supermajority government. So we have had a political transition in the last 5 years. So there's a lot of excitement that key structural reforms to bring us up to cross the high-income nation status. We are expected to achieve that between 2026 and 2028. So these 2 years is key to us to roll out structural reforms, fiscally, in terms of the mix of the economy, in terms of the energy transition. So I think there's a lot of focus and excitement looking into Malaysia because of this crucial time.
It's great to have the excitement and the plan, but the challenge is implementation. You said before that you want to accelerate restructuring. How and which sectors in particular, and what time frame are we looking at?
We understand enough that we have to be very sector-focused. In the last 6 months since taking office, we've focused on energy transition. So we've made few key policy changes. That includes, for example, in the next few months, Malaysia will launch a regional renewable energy exchange market that will facilitate and accelerate cross-border renewable trade. Because we have this unique situation where Malaysia is geographically very central to the whole region, and you have the mainland in the north with a lot of RE potentials, but there's a lot of demand as well in terms of RE in Malaysia, in Singapore, and Malaysia is well positioned to connect the whole region. Because of that, I think some key decisions had to be made. And the policy of the past was to develop organically for our market first, so that we build the capacity domestically before we think about trade. But we've taken that very bold step to lead the way towards a regional energy exchange in the region. So I think because of that, as I said, we will have to scale up our capacity by about 11 times in the next 20 years. And for that to happen, we have to invest about $150 billion in infrastructure in the next 20 years. So all this with very focused on energy transition, I think it bodes well to the region, as well as to investors, as well as to scale up our transition from medium value manufacturing to high value leadership in energy.
Might funding be an issue?
So far, we've had a few early takers in terms of interest. I think Southeast Asia remains one of the fastest growing region in the world. It's also geographically in between two large economies. And we are at the stage where we are able to transition better. And because of that, I think the interest has always been there. It's just about the scaling up of the capacity. And Southeast Asia, especially Malaysia, has been the home for a lot of MNCs in semiconductors, in assembly, and all of us are very committed to net zero commitment by 2050. So when we debottleneck, starting from policy and regulations, to facilitating the market, to diverting national resources and allocations towards infrastructure, I think that's where the interest has been pouring so far.
As you said, energy is a key sector. Oil, it is an oil-producing country, but it's also a country where there's tremendous oil subsidies, and some of those subsidies are going to people who don't even need it. How are you looking at subsidies? What's the outlook?
I know in the past, successive administrations in Malaysia has always looked at subsidy retargeting as a great political cost, because Malaysia is a heavily subsidized society when it comes to energy. We have blanket energy subsidies for diesel, for petrol, for electricity. And that has been a litmus test for previous administrations. In the last 6 months, we've rolled out a subsidy retargeting program. We divide it into 3 chunks. We transitioned from a blanket subsidy system to a means tested. For electricity, for example, is based on energy consumption. It's a painful process we have to go through, because we had removed energy subsidies for industries. So industries have to pay market price now. The next step is to remove to domestic users with very high energy usage. And by the end of the year, we would have saved, I think, about 15% of the annual subsidy bill that took up 25% of national operating budget every year. So the saving would have gone to social safety net. Saving would have gone to building infrastructure, especially in sectors and areas that we want to develop further: renewables, digital, semiconductors, and so on.
You keep talking about semiconductors. I think a lot of people don't realize that Malaysia produces a lot of the chips, in fact, 30% of the back end. What is the strategy to capitalize on the opportunities, given that semiconductors are the focus of the world right now?
Malaysia has had semiconductor industry since the 70s. It's just that the global value chain of semiconductors dissect different countries for different parts of the value chain. We contribute about 30% of the assembly, testing, and packaging of chips. But there is an opportunity now that we diversify. We are looking at also fabrication. And I think there are opportunities, given the presence of all the big names of semiconductors of the world in Malaysia. And the demand for semiconductors will continue to grow. I mean, people talk about generative AI. And the consequence of that is definitely a demand for better chips, faster chips in the future. And we are at the stage where our workforce is positioned and groomed to move and diversify from the mid-level value chain of packaging and testing.
How so? I mean, when you talk about the workforce that is groomed and being skilled to perform those tasks, I mean, give us a sense of what is being done, because there has been a shortage, there continues to be a shortage, and even countries like Singapore, which has been in the business for a very long time, is having issues.
The policies of the past was very much supply-driven. That means we built our universities and technical colleges, we built a national curriculum, and it has worked for about 30 years. But the pace of technology has picked up, and we are shifting towards a demand-driven by giving the freedom and incentives and working with industries so that industries are given the skill to train very quickly, more on taking the approach of on-the-job training, moving away from a national certification, more towards taking people and training them in the industry. So we've run pilot tests. We're going to scale it up, and we're going to replicate the same for other industries as well. So manufacturing is one. That means national incentives and investment incentives will have to move away from purely tax and fiscal incentives, more towards upskilling and training incentive for manufacturers. And this, I think, will be received very well and will allow us to scale up training and preparation of the workforce at much faster speed. And we are looking at national bootcamp. We have a shortage, just like any countries in the world, for coders, software engineers, data analysts. And we've realized that you don't need to go to universities for 4 years to do that. People can do this constantly in chunk-size training and bootcamp. And some people do this, virtually. It has been happening all over the place in the last few years, but now the government is pumping resources to scale it up at the national scale. And I think that will complement whatever we have through our training institutions.
Does it mean that other states beyond Penang will be possible centers as well?
Yes, yes. Of course,
10 years down the road, I mean, how is it going to look like? Give us a sense of the vision for Malaysia.
We do have existing infrastructure in certain parts of the countries for certain industries. So semiconductors has been in the north for a long time, based in Penang. Obviously, it will grow organically, and I can understand when investments comes, obviously, naturally, they will gravitate towards where the industry has been. But given our focus to diversify, there are various activities and investments that can be spread across the country. And we are looking, for example, at the central region on the more high-end R&D data centers. We are looking at the south, for example, to focus not just on the traditional oil and gas and new fuel, but also on renewables. And I think with massive investments, both from the private and government sector, we will be able to balance the focus between the regions.
Minister, I'd like your views on the trends in the world today. There's a lot of talk about decoupling, deglobalization, some say re-globalization, onshoring, friendshoring. Where are we in this conversation, and where do you see Malaysia fitting in?
Malaysia has always been a trading nation. And one of our strength in the past is the uniqueness of our society. It's a very multiracial society, and we have cultural and historical connections with all the major parts of the economies of the world. We have a very much westernized education system and administrative system. We have very close ties with the Muslim world. We have a significant Chinese population that works very well with our focus with China market. We also have significant Indian population that connects us to India. And being part of Southeast Asia, we are part of that 600 million market. And I think going forward, we want to play to our strength and continue to to work collaboratively. And the next focus for us, of course, are new growth regions. And that's why part of the reasons I think Malaysia has always participated at the highest level at this forum. And I think the partnership is important for the future. And if we develop right partnerships and playing to our strength and our partner strength, and that will allow us to co-write to new markets and new industries and new focus sectors.
But how much pressure are you feeling from the tension between the US and China? Southeast Asian nations have often said they don't want to be asked to choose sides, and rightly so. But how much pressure are you feeling?
We were built over the years through friendships with, often conflicting geopolitical tensions around the world. And we have been able to work with the US, with China, with any blocs in the last 50 years. And that is a testimony of how we have grown, and we provided value to all in that sense. So I think it's a skill that we've picked up along the way, and I think we will maintain that skill. And we always believe that so long as we offer the value, and so long we offer access to that big market of Southeast Asia, and so long we continue to grow, I think we are the right partners for everyone.
It's a new government, 6 months old. Is it stable? Will it be able to push through the reforms and the plans that the government has right now?
It's a grand national unity government, and because of that, we have a 2/3 majority that allows us to amend constitution. We've not seen this in a generation.
But how stable? That is the question.
Well, I think we will last the full term, as opposed to the previous 3 administrations. And I think there's also a yearning with Malaysians that we want to march forward. We've gone through that political transition. There was a change of one-party rule for the first time in 2018. It took some time to settle down. The dust has settled. The onus is for us to leverage and take the opportunity of this super majority and stability to push through the reforms. And that's why the timing of the decisions are very important, because we've seen in previous governments, and democratic tenure has its shelf life as well. We notice that if key structural reforms are not made in the first year of taking office, usually it will be reversed or it will be put on the back burner, because by the second year you are in office, you'll be thinking about general elections in 2 years' time. So it's very important for us to phase in reforms one after another. The trick is to balance between consistent policy changes with the need to not to rock the boat too much, because just like any countries in the world, we are facing high expectation from society. Society is grappling with inflation, with disparity in wages. And that's the focus that has been taken by this government, that the structural reforms goes in chunk size, month after month, and it will provide for that strong foundation, and we hope the result will speak by itself.
The thing is, if you speak to the investment community, the corporates, there's a sense of urgency. They say Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim had a long time to think about policies, and now that he is in power, he needs to put those policies in place in a hurry.
We talk about sustainability, and just like energy transition, just like the economy, political sustainability is also important. And I think that's why balancing between the list of reforms and what needs to be done with managing the expectations and getting the overall ecosystem to be on board and on the same page is important. And I think 1 year is not a long time. We've done a major reform on subsidy in the first 6 months. The pace of policy change will pick up from the second half of the year because we are phasing everything to build up towards the budget announcements in November. So we'll launch a new industrial master plan in August. We will have a revision of 5-year planning in September. And I think there will be more clarity on month-to-month basis, because what we want to avoid as well is going with a big bang, with a list of things that we intend to do, and 6 months down the line, disappoint everyone with the pace of implementation. So balancing between what we intend to do with how we do it, I think that's key to making it sustainable.
Minister, just one final question as we wrap up. We opened up the discussion talking about growth. We're looking at about 4.5. Is there a sense that you could get to 5 this year?
I'm actually cautiously optimistic. I think we will be able to cross 5. Even if we don't cross, it's on the high end of the 4. The trick is to make sure that we divert national allocations away from subsidies and put more into infrastructure projects, because we would like to use this so-called down cycle, a slowing down of global economy, to do all the investments and refocusing of our economy so that when it does pick up, we are in a position to really benefit. So, of course, government then has to reprioritize. I think in the next 1 or 2 years, we can see a better than expectation growth if government can push up public spending as well as long-term investments in the high-growth sectors that we want to focus in.
An upbeat assessment of the economy. Minister, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much. Thank you.